Francis met with thousands of young people in Paraguay, and like he did in Brazil 2 years ago, asked them to make a mess.
Hagan lío, pero también ayuden a arreglar y a organizar el lío que hacen. Las dos cosas. Hagan lío y organícenlo bien.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt coming to you from the offices of the Remnant newspaper. Go out and make a mess. I know that's old footage, but it just never loses its charm. The Pope telling the world to go out and make a mess. So this is exactly what's coming to pass now. The radical Jesuit from South America told the world what he wants, and now he's going ahead and getting it done. He wants a mess. He wants public adulterers to receive the sacraments, of course, unrepentant public adulterers.
Pope Francis wants it to be addressed. He said last year on the question, it's time for mercy for divorced and remarried Catholics with regard to receiving communion.
Weak on abortion too.
Well, I hate to say it, but yeah, a little bit weak on abortion. Remember, he said right towards the beginning of his pontificate, let's not be obsessed with abortion.
Why not?
What do we have now? I don't know how many billions of dead babies since 1973. And the Holy Father is telling us not to be obsessed with that, but we need to do something about climate change. Now I'm excited to report, everybody's following this one, that the Holy Father wants women deacons. He wants women deacons because back in the 12th century, evidently there were these ladies, these gals, who apparently were serving some sort of function as deacons. So we need to get back. We need to get back to the 12th century. Get some gals. Now, of course, this does not mean women priests, and they've told us that again and again. They're just going to have women deacons, and we're going to know it's going to stop. Yeah, they're not going to go any further than that, because like altar girls, for example, never led to something like women deacons. Well, sort of now, but I mean initially, right? So that was pretty interesting. This whole thing is crazy. The 12th century, I mean, that's fantastic about these ladies. I'm glad they were deacons, but I think in the 12th century, we also had the traditional Latin Mass throughout the entire Roman Rite. So if we want to go back and make things like they were in the good old days in the 12th century, perhaps we should restore the traditional Latin Mass universally. Also, speaking of the 12th century, I'm pretty sure that Pope Adrian VI was not handing out $500,000 from Peter's pence to finance roving caravans of illegals trying to breach the walls of Holy Christendom. And yet, that's exactly what Pope Francis has done now. He's given $500,000 to the caravan. Francis is using the papacy to make sort of a South American dictatorship mess happen throughout the whole world. He really meant that when he called for making a mess, disrupt everything. That's the way they work. And then you have one ear to listen to the people, one ear to listen to God, and it sounds so great, but what they really are talking about is revolution. And he's doing this all the way to the top in the church right now. So it's not just so-called traditional Catholics who are concerned and more concerned every day by what's happening in the Vatican. Here, for example, is Philip Lawler, a person with whom we've had differences even in the pages of the Remnant many times over the years. He was he's an intelligent, good man, but quite an outspoken neo-Catholic until the reign of Pope Francis. So here's Lawler, and I'll put this in context. This is Philip Lawler talking to Raymond Arroyo on EWTN, which at one time was Neo-Catholic Central. They're talking about Pope Francis, which Lawler now calls the lost shepherd who is misleading his flock. Check this out.
And I think it's a symptom of what I'm trying to get at in this book, is that Pope Francis has created enough confusion so that there is a huge space for maneuver for people who want to, one way or another, sort of take an end run around church moral teachings.
Using this idea of accompaniment and this idea of mercy.
I was originally very enthusiastic about Pope Francis, and over time became more and more concerned and dismayed and disoriented. But when I saw what happened with that synod, with the manipulation of the synod, and then with the Memorias Laetitia coming after it, I said, this is more than simply imprudence in expression. This is a deliberate effort to confuse. Because why else would Pope Francis have declined to answer the dubia, the perfectly legitimate questions from 4 cardinals asking him for clarity? Why would you not want clarity unless your intent was to provide that fuzzy space in which people can maneuver around church teaching?
Archbishop Victor Fernandez, who is sometimes called the kissing bishop, he wrote that book about kissing some years ago. He said in 2015, Francis is aiming at irreversible reform. Why? Why?
Good question. I don't have the answer. I don't have the ability to look inside his head. But there's something inherently wrong with the idea of irreversible reform, unless what you mean by reform is back to the fundamentals of the Catholic faith. Because the role of the Pope is inherently to conserve, to protect the deposit of the faith. Of course, I don't enjoy criticizing the Pope, but there is a point at which, as I say, in a loving family, if the father has a problem, you have to confront it. Eventually, there has to be an intervention. And we need an intervention.
So do you have that? You got that? Mark Shea, Father Jimmy Martin, and all you other traditionalist haters out there? The rad trads that you all enjoy vilifying and calumniating on a daily basis are fast becoming pretty much what's left of the practicing Catholics the world over. You're going after everybody now. So it's no wonder this week, once again, got some good news for you tonight, that another group of preeminent priests, scholars, theologians came out with a desperate appeal to the bishops of the world to pay heed now to their formal accusations of heresy against Pope Francis. Heresy. Now, these guys are academics, they're priests, they're liturgists, they're biblical scholars, they're professors. They're not traditionalists. Nobody asked me to sign this thing. Then again, I'm not an academic, so maybe that's why. Nobody asked me to sign. I'm not shilling for something that I had a hand in. I had nothing to do with this thing. But what they're basically saying, these men, they're begging the bishops of the world to, quote, take the steps necessary to deal with the grave situation caused by Pope Francis's words and actions over several years now, which have given rise to one of the worst crises in the history of the Catholic Church. End quote. Please, are you listening to that? One of the worst crises in the history of the Church. This isn't the Remnant saying. This isn't Michael Matz. This isn't Archbishop Lefebvre saying it. These are just mainstream professors, theologians, priests pointing out the obvious. I would disagree with them on one count. It's not one of the worst crises in the history of the Catholic Church. This is the worst crisis in the history of the Catholic Church.
Hello, I'm Father Fessler. This is Mark Brumley from Ignatius Press. And Mark and I want to make a brief comment on a document which we saw as released this morning called Open Letter to the Bishops of the Catholic Church, which was released on LifeSite News in several languages. It's an important document. I think something needs to be said about it. So my first question was, well, wait a minute. Should this document be ignored? Why would it be ignored? Number one, if the authors are clearly beyond the range of ordinary human discourse, right, civil discourse, they shouldn't be listened to. But as a matter of fact, these authors, some of them anyway, are quite reputable. So the second question is, well, what about the document itself? It's 20 pages long, so I read it this morning. And I have to say, there's 7 different counts. They accuse heresy counts here. Each one of them is very clearly stated. Each one of them is backed up by previous church teaching, either councils or popes. And then they show where Pope Francis has made statements which seem to contradict these church teachings. And then also how, by his actions and his inaction in some cases, seems to corroborate that understanding. So from the point of view of the document itself, it's not a document which can be simply dismissed out of hand as being by some extremists who are overheated.
And so what we have to ask ourselves, and especially those who are right away are going to have a knee-jerk reaction to this new statement and to these gentlemen, these academics saying what they've said, accusing the Pope of heresy. Well, they're a bunch of haters. They don't understand. They're rad trads, whatever epithet and name you want to throw at them. If that's what your reaction is, let's just slow down for a second and say, why? Why would these highly respected, faithful, mass-going Catholics, why would they be encouraging the world episcopate to do something to stop the Pope? Is it just really because, as the critics are all wanting to say, is it really just because they need more bran in their diet and Francis is just too doggone nice to the poor people? Really? Do you honestly think that's what it is? Or don't you think that maybe, just maybe, there's more to this? And that what we've actually got going on here is a radical takeover of the papacy. And that takeover is now causing the world in which we live to become a very dangerous place because the moral authority of the church is gone. It is in the toilet. But you see, what's happening here, while all this silliness is going on, is the secularist states of the world are taking advantage of not only the whole conciliar revolution in the church, but now very specifically the pontificate of a far-left pope named Francis. I mean, you know that's going on, right? Well, Francis is sticking his little daisies in the gun barrels while the cameras are clicking away. Laws are being enacted one after another all across the world whereby two men now can get married, not only get married, but adopt little kids, little children. You know, post-delivery infanticide is now legal. They're killing babies outside the womb under the protection of law. Words, categories such as mother and father are banned. Deadly persecution of Christians is taking place all over the world every week. I mean, really, friends, this is getting very serious.
With the death toll at now at least 359, this is possibly ISIS's deadly ever single attack. Watch in this chilling video, you can clearly see one of the bombers about to set off his explosive in a church, brushing past a little girl with the bomb on his back, only to kill scores of children moments later.
And we're not just talking about the Latin Mass movement anymore, please. We're not talking about traditionalist versus neo-Catholic, as though we have the luxury of those debates anymore. We're talking about the end of Christianity in the modern world, don't you see? And there's only one entity on the face of the earth that has the power to do anything about it, and that's the Catholic Church. And Pope Francis is supposedly the head of that church, right? And quite frankly, there is no time left for Francis to chase his little hippie daydreams of unicorns and daffodils and imagine there's no heaven, imagine there's no hell below us. We don't have time for that. Time for the world in which we live, time for Western civilization is running out. And the Christophobes, the God haters, the ideological sons of Hitler and Stalin and Mao and worse, they are emboldened by this pontificate. They are emboldened by the fact that the leader of the church, of the world's only moral authority, the Catholic Church, founded by Jesus Christ, is now running around like some flower child on LSD, waxing rhapsodic about climate change and open borders, while the church's ancient enemies are loading up and declaring war on all things Christian. And that includes you, that includes me, and it includes our children. And of course, I'm not just talking, when I'm talking about persecution of Christians, we're not just talking about ISIS. There's a much bigger problem going on right now. The problem of the total secularization of the West, in states, in governments, in schools. Here in America, for example, I just saw the other day that one of the first orders of business of the new U.S. House of Representatives, manned by pro-aborts across the board, one of their first orders of business was to make an attempt to strike the words, "So help me God," from the oath that they give to witnesses that come before their various committees. That was one of the first things they wanted to get done. Now let's think about that for a moment, because it seemed comparatively as quite small. They've been trying to get "In God We Trust" off the currency and get Bibles out of courtrooms for a long time. Well, now it's "So help me God" they got to get rid of. But think about this. What entity, other than a truly demonic one, would actually go to the trouble now in 2019 of lobbying for the eradication of "So help me God" from the oath? The simple acknowledgement of the law of God. But I remember being struck when I was a kid watching The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland. And I remember when Maid Marian, who's a Norman, enters into the inn where the Saxons, the merry men, the mortal enemies of the Normans, they're plotting to rescue Robin Hood. You remember this? You're too young. You don't remember this. They don't trust these Saxons, Robin's men. They do not trust Maid Marian at all at this point. She's a Norman. You can't trust her. So they think it's a trap. But then the Catholic priest, little Friar Tuck, has settled a little dilemma that they're having with time running out for Robin. He steps in, and some of you who have seen this movie will remember what he does. Check this out.
What is it, Prin?
A lady, sir. The Lady Marian.
What? It's a trap, Will. Watch those windows.
She has the password, all right.
Is she alone?
Yes, sir.
Fetch her in. What do you want, milady?
I want to help him.
How did you find us here?
Never mind that now. Please don't stand there staring. Tell me what I can do.
Don't trust her. It's another Norman trick.
Would I come here alone if it were a trap? What's to prevent your keeping me here and killing me if... Oh, is there no one here with sense enough to see?
One moment. We have to make sure, my child. You're a good daughter of the church. You swear by Our Lady that you want to help Robin?
I swear, good father.
Have you thought of a way?
Yes.
Can you get us into the castle?
That would do no good. He's too heavily guarded. But I thought of another way. Listen to me.
Okay, so it's just an old movie. I get that. But it reminds us of what we've lost, how well Christian society used to work when it was based on the law of God and on the laws of his church, and when a man's oath before God meant everything. You see, we've lost all that. Today there is no higher authority which our states will acknowledge. And now they're making sure that no one even gives lip service to God in a court of law or while swearing an oath. You see, this is truly, fundamentally, inherently of the devil. It's demonic. You see, because there is no God for them. So what does this mean? It means that in the world that we are all entering into now, the post-Christian, Christophobic, godless, anti-Catholic world that we're entering into, every one of us is going to be on our own. Thus, the anarchy that we already see spilling out into our streets is only going to get worse. So yes, friends, serious Catholics are standing against Pope Francis, but not because they hate Pope Francis, or not because they don't want mercy for sinners, or greater care for poor people. You see, the Catholic Church was the strongest entity in the world for taking care of poor people. When she was strong, every Catholic, priest, nuns, entire orders of sisters and monks all over the world, starting the orphanages and the schools that we've talked about, the soup kitchens, the hospitals. Nobody could hold a candle to the Catholic Church. It's not just the Mass. It's going back to that fundamentally ordered understanding of why we're on this earth. So we, as traditionalists, care for the poor much more than any liberal prelate or pope who does lip service for the poor, but doesn't want to strengthen the very organization which did more for the poor and the underprivileged and downtrodden than any other organization in history. That's the practical application of traditional Catholicism. So these scholars and theologians and academics now taking a stand against Pope Francis and his heresy, they don't hate the Pope, but they, of all people, are keenly aware that the Vicar of Christ on earth is the only man on earth with the means and the assistance from God himself at his disposal to initiate the restoration of the peace of Christ through the proclamation of the kingship of Christ. You see, and that's precisely what they're not doing. They're ignoring the kingship of Christ. They're talking about dialogue and ecumenism and anything they can think of, watering it all down to a universal salvationism finally, destroying and undermining the one institution in the world today who can restore peace to the world, the Catholic Church. You see, Pope Francis, he heads up a chain of command that could actually initiate the restoration of order. The infrastructure is all there. The churches still dot the horizons of cities and towns all over the world. If he would become Catholic again, and if he would begin to proclaim the kingship of Christ again, not only would the poor people benefit from that, but the entire world would, because the conscience of the world would begin to be restored, because the people would know that their souls are immortal, and they're going to either end up in heaven or hell. So what we do on this earth matters. That's the message of the Catholic Church. And the Pope must tell the world that message. He must give them that message. And instead, he's worried about sustainable development, climate change, straws in the ocean, and women deacons. You see, he's going the wrong direction. And it's desperate now that someone reach him so he turns around and begins to restore the church. Otherwise, there's no hope for the world. The greatest crisis in the world today is not ISIS. The greatest crisis in the world today is not terrorism. It is the fact that the Vicar of Christ on earth has gone over to the other side. Until he returns as successor of St. Peter and Vicar of Christ on earth, until he understands what his job is, until he comes back to the Catholic faith, watch your back. Because the followers of Christ, for all of us, the world will become a war zone. If that doesn't happen, it's already becoming a war zone. So yes, bishops of the world, Cardinal Burke, Archbishop Cordileone, Bishop Schneider, yes, bishops of the Society of St. Pius X, we add our voices to those who are begging you to become like the 10 just men of Sodom, for whom our merciful God will surely spare his church and deliver the world from the fires of hell on earth that are beginning to burn all around us now. Bishops of the world, you must act now. Restore the peace of Christ by proclaiming the kingship of Christ. In other words, the time has come, Your Excellencies, to resist Pope Francis to his face. I'm Michael Matt for Remnant TV. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching our video today. If you'd like more from Remnant TV, can I make a recommendation for you? Please subscribe to the Remnant print edition newspaper. This is the oldest traditional Catholic newspaper in the world. It's 52 years old. It's got some of the great writers. You can actually subscribe to the print edition, which a lot of people nowadays prefer to have the old crinkly paper newsprint, or you can become an e-subscriber. You can read it on your phone. You can read it on your computer. We've gone to great lengths to make sure that the newspaper is still the center of our apostolate, and it pretty much finances everything else, including Remnant TV. So become a subscriber, print edition. You can do both. You can subscribe to the print edition and to the e-edition. Visit us online every day. Maybe stop by our store, pick up some products. Mostly, thank you so much. Thanks for coming and watching us once a week. We want to bring these videos to you at least once a week, and a great way to make sure that that happens is to subscribe to the Remnant newspaper. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.